All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome once again to Platform 2025. It was great to see so many familiar faces last night. Thanks to you guys for coming back for another year. For those that this is your first year at Platform, a special welcome to you. I hope it's the first of many that you're going to come back and join us for. As Marlena said, we've got a great couple of days planned for you. You're, of course, going to see some of the latest features and technology the team has been hard at work on. You're going to learn about some of our partnerships and some new announcements there. You'll get a chance to meet many scalers, and please do that on the trade show floor. But before we get into all of that, I thought we'd spend a few minutes while I was up here and talk about poetry. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Jeff, every time I go to a tech show, all we ever do is talk about poems. So I know it's overdone, but bear with me because I think there's an important lesson that we can learn here. And the poem we're going to study is this one. Some of you may recognize it. This is the famous last line of the poem. This is the second most famous poem in American history. The first is, of course, Green Eggs and Ham by Dr. Seuss. But a very close second is this poem by Robert Frost. And the last line says, "Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference." Now, if you went to high school here in the United States, there's a good chance that you had to study this poem, maybe even had to memorize this poem while you were in school. And your high school teacher probably very excitedly explained to you that the meaning of this poem was a calling to do your own thing and go your own way and blaze a trail and fight the man and all this kind of stuff. Right? And if you don't remember your high school teacher doing that, you might remember the movie Dead Poets Society, where Robin Williams, portraying a high school teacher, did exactly the same thing. Now, I hope you learn a lot while you're here at Platform, but if you only learn one thing, you're going to remember this. Both Robin Williams and your high school teacher got this poem completely wrong. This poem has nothing to do with going your own way and being independent. So I thought we'd take a few minutes to take a look at this poem together and explore what it might mean. So, without further ado, I'm going to read this to you. Now, if you're not familiar with the poem, fear not, it is very short. This will not take me very long. So here we go. This is The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveler long I stood, and looked down one, as far as I could, to see where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other just as fair, and having, perhaps, the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had warned them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. That's the end of the poem. So there again is the famous last line of the poem. And again, everybody jumping on the bandwagon with your high school teacher. This is printed on t-shirts and coffee mugs and motivational posters and all the like, right? But the first clue that your high school teacher got this completely wrong is hidden in plain sight. It's in the title of the poem itself. You see, a lot of people mistakenly think that the name of this poem is The Road Less Traveled, which would make sense if you're focused on this last line of the poem. But Robert Frost himself said that the meaning of this poem was, in his words, tricky and not obvious. So if the greatest poet in American history says the meaning of the poem is not obvious, did he really sum it up in the last 22 words of the poem? I doubt it, right? I doubt it. And the title of the poem is not The Road Less Traveled. The title of the poem is The Road Not Taken. The poem is about the other road, right? So let's jump back to the beginning of the poem and take a look. So the setup here is pretty straightforward. We have a traveler walking through the woods. They come upon a fork in the road, and they're going to decide which way to go. And a couple times, as you heard in the poem, they lament the fact that they realize once they've gone one way, they can't really go back and do it again. And this, of course, is an allegory for the kinds of decisions that we face in life every day, right? We don't have a time machine, so you can't go back and just do it over. And so you make your decisions and you live with those consequences. And so the traveler naturally is going to weigh their options. So they take a look at the first road and they notice the kinds of things you might expect to notice if you were looking at a road. How long is it? Where does it turn? What kind of stuff is growing along the side of the road? And then the traveler turns their attention to the second road. And here is where the tone of the poem changes. Immediately, the traveler's like, oh, well, this does look like the better road. It's the first thing they think, right? The language that's used here, it was grassy and it wanted wear. That's my favorite phrase in the poem, by the way, wanted wear, because it's as though the inanimate object, the road, has come alive and is calling to the traveler, I want you to come this way, and the traveler felt it, right? But then something interesting happens. On the immediate next line of the poem, the traveler's like, well, wait a second. Now that I think about it, these roads kind of are the same. And over the next several lines of the poem, the traveler convinces themselves that in fact the roads really are the same. And this is what the poem is about. This is the trap that Robert Frost wants us to recognize, is that every one of us has this deep wiring in our brains that leads us sometimes to make these kinds of mistakes. How many times in your life have you faced a decision and you immediately thought one thing and then you spent the next hour, day, week overthinking it only to talk yourself out of it, and then a week or a month or a year later you look back and you go, I should have trusted my gut. Right? We all do it. We all do it, right? And Robert Frost knows that this is, again, it's probably in our evolutionary biology, because if you imagine this was 20,000 years ago when you really were walking through the woods and you came upon a fork in the road, and one path was the path that you walked every day and it took you back to your village and it was pretty safe, and the other path looked pretty cool but might get you eaten by a bear, maybe you should take that other path, right? However, what he's telling us here is that you're not always going to get eaten by a bear, right? And don't let your brain trick you into thinking and believing that it's using wisdom and logic and reason when it may in fact be operating out of fear or doubt or even apathy, right? That's what this poem is all about. Now, if we jump to the end of the poem, of course we know the traveler did in fact choose the less traveled road. We don't know why, right? Maybe it's coincidence. Dumb luck, we have no idea, but we know they're happy about it, right? That we know that they said it made all the difference. But the setup here is also interesting. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence, right? So this is where in the poem it's kind of revealed that we thought we were going down the path kind of in real time with the traveler, but in fact, the traveler is recounting the story to us. They're telling us this after it already happened. And as they start that story, they start with the sigh, right? And it calls to my mind the kind of thing that might happen if a grandchild were to ask a grandparent something like, Grandpa, Grandpa, tell us again the story about the time that you did X. And Grandpa goes, whew, okay, and starts the story, right? Because in that sigh and in that throwaway okay, right, there's a lot contained in there, right? As we all tell stories like this, like a lot of facts and information about the story comes rushing into your head, right? And it's going to eventually come out in the story, but of course it doesn't right at the beginning, right? And so there's that sigh. Now, we don't know, of course, what the traveler meant by this sigh here. Maybe they're remembering that the road was difficult or long. It never said that the road was easy. We just know that it made all the difference, right? That they were happy with that choice. Or maybe they're remembering the moment in time at which they had convinced themselves the two roads were the same. And it was only after the fact, looking back, that they recognized they weren't the same at all. And this is a sigh of relief. We don't know, right? But this is what Robert Frost wants us to take away from the poem. And that, of course, just as Robert Frost envisioned, brings us to talking about IT infrastructure in the year 2025, right? So here we are talking about just that. And, we're talking about edge computing once again, and we've been doing this for a couple of years. Now, edge computing, everybody in the room using Scale is using edge in some way, shape, or form, right? Sometimes edge is the last few servers that exist on a factory floor or in a truck or on a boat. Sometimes the last of your servers is actually still in a data center, right? Wherever the end is, right, that's the edge. And this is the continuation of a trend which has been happening for decades in IT, right? We started with centralized computing in the mainframe. That gave way to distributed computing with client-server architectures. back to centralization with the data center and the cloud, and here we are moving back towards distributed computing with edge once again. And the signs that this is happening and that this is a change of an era are all around us, not least of which is what's happened with our friends over at VMware, right? So VMware was obviously the dominant operating system of that data center era, and then Broadcom bought them. Now last year, we talked at length about this transaction, and I won't spend nearly as much time here, but you guys know the ramifications continue to happen. What we do know about Broadcom, not specific to VMware, just in general, is that they like to acquire software companies, which in their own words, are mature companies with mature products in mature markets. Now, mature markets is financial doublespeak for a market which has already peaked and is declining. And that's the key. If they believe that the market is peaked and declining, they're going to operate the business in a certain way. And they engage in a process that private equity firms refer to as profit harvesting. Doesn't that sound fun, right? So profit harvesting. And the kinds of things they do, again, because they think it's a declining market, is they cut R&D expenses. Because why would you invest into a declining market? They cut their investment in the channel and cut out channel partners. Some of you guys have felt this. Why would they invest in the channel if they believe it's a declining market? They raise prices. They drop products which are not that profitable. They focus only on their largest and stickiest and most profitable customers. Now, it doesn't feel great. It's not the way that I would want to run a business. However, if you put yourself in their shoes and believe that the market is declining, you could see why they might do this. And this is why folks like Gartner, as the slide indicates, say that 80% of VMware customers are going to move away. Some of them are going to move away because their products got discontinued. Some of them are going to move away because they see where the future is going. Others might move away out of spite. I'm sure we have a few of you guys in the room, right? And some will stay behind, just like some people still use mainframes. That's okay, right? But the world is changing with edge computing. However, there are still some misconceptions about the edge, right? And I have 3 of them I want to talk to you about today because I hear them pretty frequently. So the first misconception is the edge is just another name for on-prem. Now, of course, at the edge, you have infrastructure, and that infrastructure is by default on-prem. But this wildly undersells what the edge is really all about. And to underscore this, we just have to go back in time a little bit to the same rough era of cloud computing. So this slide, and it may be difficult to read depending on where you're sitting, but you probably recognize the shape of it. This is the Gartner Magic Quadrant for cloud computing in 2010. It's the second year they did a Magic Quadrant, so it's not like we got it wrong the first time. They had 2 runs at this. Now, you guys know that Gartner is a firm which has paid a lot of money, some of you are subscribers, to predict future technology trends, to identify the vendors who are going to lead customers toward that future, and to tell customers where to place their bets. And in Gartner's infinite wisdom in 2010, they said if you're an early adopter and you want to get on this cloud computing bandwagon, the places where you should make your bets are Verizon, AT&T, and Rackspace. Right? I heard the chuckles, right? I heard the chuckles, because this is comical today, right? If we were to look at the Magic Quadrant now, and I've got it here, but you already know what the answer is. It's Amazon and Microsoft and Google, right? So what did Gartner get wrong, right? They don't always get it right. This was perhaps catastrophically wrong, right? But what did they get wrong? Gartner thought in 2010 that the cloud was just a great big data center. And the reason that you would move applications to the cloud is because they had better economies of scale. It would be cheaper to run your apps in the cloud. And that may be true in some cases. And some applications did move to the cloud. But what did Microsoft, Amazon, and Google see? They saw that the cloud was a different place to build applications, a different way to create applications and integrate applications, and you could do it much faster. And today, as you look back, the reason Gartner got this so comically wrong is that 95% of the apps in the cloud today weren't migrated there from a smaller data center. They were built in the cloud to begin with. And this is exactly what we see happening at the edge. So a little bit later this morning, you're going to get the product roadmap presentation. It's going to have a whole bunch of cool new stuff. and I don't want to steal all their thunder, but one of the things you're going to see is a few elements of version 10 of HyperCore, something that internally has been known as Project Kraken. Now, a kraken is a mythological Greek sea monster, which I know mostly from the 1981 version of the movie Clash of the Titans, where it was this weird claymation animated thing. So I asked AI to give me a much cooler kraken wearing a scale t-shirt, and this is what it came up with. But what we have in Kraken is the introduction of application management. In other words, the same ease of use, the same ease of deployment that you've come to know about Scale in terms of deploying infrastructure, we are now bringing to actual application and application management. Said differently, you can now effortlessly deploy applications to one, some, or all of your sites without ever leaving Fleet Manager with the click of one button, right down the same lane as what we saw happen with the public cloud. And this is just one of many features which are going in this direction on our roadmap of application management. The second misconception is the idea that you can just run everything in the cloud. Now, obviously, I've got a room full of believers here. You wouldn't be here. However, I wanted to underscore this a little bit because I think that AI has really brought this one to the forefront because we see that things like AI inference can make a lot of sense at the edge. But you may not have done the math to actually figure out, well, how exactly does this work? So to get to that point, I want to talk to you about something near and dear to my heart, which are video games. So my wife is here in the room, and those that know me well know I still play a lot of video games. Pretty much every night, I find a way to sneak a game or two in before I go to bed. And even when I'm on the road, I play video games. So my gaming system of choice is a PlayStation 5. I don't carry it with me to the hotel here. But there's an application, that's my MacBook right there, that I can run on my MacBook called PS5 Remote. And you see I'm playing the game Harry Potter Hogwarts Legacy. It's a good game, by the way, if you haven't played it. So there I am playing Harry Potter, but that game is not installed on my laptop. I'm connected to my PlayStation in my basement playing that game remotely. I'm not using the public cloud. I don't have it local. I'm just using my stuff, right, and playing that game. Now, any modern game like Harry Potter is going to max out the GPU pretty much the entire time you're playing the game. It's going to hammer the CPU pretty well as well. So that's not unlike an AI application, which we all know is going to hammer the GPU. Now, you may or may not know this, and hat tip to my friends from AMD in the room, but a PlayStation is just an AMD computer. It's an AMD CPU and an AMD GPU. And so we can do a little experiment. What might it cost to play Harry Potter Hogwarts Legacy in AWS if I were to play it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? I can calculate the GPU cycles, the CPU cycles, the amount of data that has to move in and out of the cloud in order for me to do that. And the answer is it's about $3,000 a month. Right? So you have two ways you can enjoy this fine game. One is buy a $400 PlayStation and run it from your basement like I do, or you could spend $33,000 a year doing the same thing. Right? So it's two orders of magnitude different. So no, not every application is going to run in the cloud. The third and the final misconception, and I think by far the most important one, is this. It's the idea that we just don't have that many apps to run at the edge anyway. And the problem here is there's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So I'd like you to imagine for this section that you're the CIO of a retailer and you have about 1,000 stores. The lesson here applies even if you only have one location. It's just easier to visualize. Now, I do realize we have a couple of CIOs of 1,000 store retailers in the audience, so I know this is real easy for you. But everybody else, just pretend you've got 1,000 stores. And you find a new application. And that application is something you want to run in the stores, and it needs infrastructure. And so you spin up a project, and you put guys in white panel vans, and you send them out to the store. And you're going to install that server with that GPU in it 1,000 times. And you're going to install the application on that server 1,000 times, and there's going to be BIOS updates and security patches for the OS, which you're going to have to do thousands of times, and so on and so forth. And the cost of getting that application out there and maintaining it is extremely high. Now, of course, we're not, we all work in organizations where we try to make money, right? So if an application cannot deliver a return on investment greater than that very high cost, you would never deploy it out at the edge. So of course there's very few applications which you would run at the edge in this way. However, with stuff like scale, where, as you guys know, with zero-touch deployment of infrastructure, with the ability to pre-configure everything in Fleet Manager and have a store operator simply plug in a server and have it work, right? You radically lower that barrier. You lower the cost of getting that infrastructure out there. Layer on top of that the Project Kraken features, version 10, and now with the click of a button, you can deploy applications in seconds. You further lower that cost, and all of a sudden, there's a whole bunch of applications which can make sense to run out at the edge, right? Previously, wasn't even close, but there's something else that's happening, and that something else is impacting every business in every which way, and that's AI, right? And one of the areas of AI that may not get talked about quite as much, but I have an interesting story to tell you about it, is AI-assisted application development. Having developers write apps faster, having people who don't normally or could never have written an app contribute to applications. And that causes an explosion in the number of apps. And so as the number of apps goes up, there's more applications which can and will run at the edge economically in a way that makes sense, right? So that brings me to my story. Now, a couple weeks ago, I was at a conference with Dusty Kokenberg, who's here. It was a retail conference, and we met with a partner, and the partner told us this story of this customer. So I'm going to paint a picture. It's sort of a tale of two cities. There's retailer number one and retailer number two. Retailer number two is who this guy was telling me about. Retailer number one is their competitor. Now, retailer number one, much as I've asked you to envision, is a CIO of a 1,000-person, or 1,000-store rather, retailer. They're very successful. They invest in technology, so this isn't a laggard customer they're trying to drag along. They want to embrace AI. They want to stay ahead of the game. And they find a really cool application. Some of you guys have seen this particular application. It's an application that deals with shoplifting, or as it's called in that industry, loss prevention. And so it uses AI and computer vision to detect shoplifting, and it promises to reduce the loss from theft by about 30%. So this is the rare kind of application that does indeed make sense to roll out to all of those locations. And so they call their partner, and they spin up a project, and the partner starts rolling vans out there, and it takes a long time, right? It takes years before they can do it, but don't worry, it'll be worth it because this application has that ROI. Right? Meanwhile, retailer number two is nearly exactly the same. It's a competitor, also a successful retailer, also about 1,000 stores. They find the very same application they would really like to get out there, and they call their partner, and their partner says, absolutely, we can help you with that. But why don't we also have a conversation about what kind of applications you may need over the next 6 months and 12 months and 24 months and 5 years, and what that may look like in this world of AI-assisted application development. And so they take a different tack, right? They deploy something like Scale, which has two impacts for them. One, as you guys know, they're able to deploy in those stores much faster using the features that you already know about inside of Scale. So they're fully spun up in about 3-4 months, right? So that's great. Then once it's out there, they use the features of version 10 to easily deploy applications, right? And then this is the true story that the partner was explaining to me. About 9 months after they started that deployment, not only was retailer number two fully deployed, but they, on their own, not because of anything I said and not because of anything the partner said, they embraced this idea of AI-assisted application development. And they found there were people in the organization, store managers, operations people, logistics, who understood, hey, we have ideas of ways to make the store a little bit more efficient, sell a little bit more product, make it a little bit more profitable. These kinds of small incremental improvements previously were not worth deploying, right, because of that high barrier. But now it was a click of a button and you could deploy that application. 9 months after they started, they had 31 new applications in production, nearly one application per week. Bear in mind, this retailer previously had one application, the point of sale system. The second app was the AI loss prevention system. So 31. So imagine now, right, how this looks not just 9 months later, but 2 years later or 5 years later. Retailer number two has hundreds or thousands of applications deployed at the edge, each one incrementally making that store a little better. Retailer number one has 1 or 2 applications deployed. I mean, they might as well not even have a computer, right? They're so far behind. They are going to get crushed by retailer number 2, right? So the question is, how did that conversation happen, right? The difference here was the conversation the partner had with retailer number 2. And I think it requires 2 things. One is something I talked about 2 years ago. So here's a picture of me with the scary Easter bunny, and that's my dad. And 2 years ago, I introduced you to my dad, Ken. And my dad was the, we'd call him director of IT today. It was information systems back then. But the director of IT for a mid-size construction company in the Chicago area called Morrison Construction, about 1,000 employees. Now, my dad taught me how to build computers. He taught me basic programming. He bought me my first video games, which maybe he regrets, but nevertheless. But he also taught me something else indirectly, sort of through observation, which is when my dad was working at Morrison, he taught me about trusted partnership because there were 2 vendors that he worked with that he trusted above all else, and that was IBM and a local value-added partner called Master Computer Systems. And he worked with these 2 vendors for over 30 years. And so that meant that at any time, if somebody from IBM or somebody from Master called my dad and said, Ken, you really need to think about doing this, he would listen, right? And I see some nods. Some of you guys have these kinds of relationships. We all want to have these kinds of relationships, right? But it has to be built on trust, not just you're trying to sell me something. It has to be built on trust. So that's one of the elements that you need. The second element is one that I talked about last year. And for those that were here last year, I introduced you to my mom, Marcia. Now, my mom is actually who got me started on my entrepreneurial journey, right? You might think, since we're doing tech here, that my entrepreneurial journey started with tech, but it didn't. It started by mowing lawns, right? And I innocently mowed the next door neighbor's lawn, and he gave me $10 for that. And Mom said, well, maybe you should go check the other neighbor, and maybe they would want their lawn cut. And they did. And pretty soon, I had 4 or 5 lawns around the block, and Mom said, you know, we could go to the library, and I could show you how to use the photocopier, and we could make flyers. And we did. And then she drove me around town, and we looked for people whose grass was just a little bit too long, and we left flyers at the house. And pretty soon, I had 30 and 40 and 60 lawns that I cut. Apartment complexes, commercial properties, all of my friends worked for me, right? Mom taught me how to do scheduling and accounting and plan. Now, bear in mind, I was 11 years old when I started this thing, which means that and I ran it through high school, but for the vast majority of that time, I couldn't even drive. So every Wednesday after school and every Saturday and every Sunday, my mom would drive me and all my equipment and my sweaty middle school friends all over town so we could mow these lawns. Now, why? Right? Did she want me to be the greatest landscaper in the Chicago area? I doubt it, right? Did she know that I'd be standing in front of you in 2025 talking about edge computing? She wasn't that clairvoyant, right? There's no way to know that. But she did know that you can make investments in the long term, and it is over the long term that unexpected and magical things can happen, right? We don't always know what's going to happen over the long term, but you certainly know when you're making an investment in that direction, right? So it's the combination of these 2 things, trusted partnership and long-term vision, that allowed that special conversation to happen. Which brings us back to Robert Frost's Road in the Woods, right? We all like to think of ourselves as technologists, which means we inherently like to think about the future in some way, shape, or form. Undoubtedly, we want to be a trusted partner for our colleagues and our clients and our vendors and the like. But imagine when that call comes in to partner number 1 from retailer number 1. And retailer number 1 again says, hey, we found this really cool AI application. It's going to completely transform the stores. We would like your help to roll this thing out to the stores. Right? Does that sales rep on the other end of the phone want to do anything that could possibly slow that deal down at that moment? In fact, they probably tell themselves, even if they know about something like scale, they tell themselves, well, you know, these guys don't run that many apps in the store. There's no sense in overthinking this thing. Most of their stuff's just going to run in the cloud. And so they do exactly what the customer asked them to do, which is they started rolling those trucks out to all those stores. And after they got it up and running, everybody high-fived each other like they just accomplished something great. completely unknowing what the future might hold. Retailer number 2, again, had the very same conversation, but had that little tweak. By the time you're 5 years into it, retailer number 1 has gone out of business again, right? Retailer number 2 is on a much happier path, right? So to have a happy ending to our story, again, you're the CIO of a 1,000-person retailer, thankfully, retailer number 2. And it's maybe 2 years, maybe even 5 years after the fact, right? And one day, a new intern comes up to you and says, hey, I was looking over the history of some of the projects that we've done here in the department, and I couldn't help but notice that you guys were really early in adopting edge computing. And knowing how much that transformed all of our operations, that must have been really cool. Like, how did that come to be? And you look at the intern and you say, kid, that is quite a story, but I can tell you this, I sure am glad that's the path that we went down. All right, everybody, thank you very much. Now before, you can clap, that's fine. Go ahead and clap. Now before I leave the stage completely, right, and again, have an excellent show with us, we do have one very special announcement about a new partnership we'd like to show you, so let's take a look. Saw that, so please help me welcome to the stage from Veeam Shiva Pillai and from Ottava TJ Houski. Thanks. All right, so it has been a journey for us to get this partnership with Veeam. I'm going to talk to both of these guys, but Shiva, I guess to get started, at least from Veeam standpoint and a product standpoint, what is this kind of all about?
Yeah, first, thanks for having me. We've got a pretty cool kit collection going up on stage.
Yeah, here we
I
go.
just noticed, so
Love it.
we might have to auction those off. Super excited to be here. We were actually in this room 6 months ago for Veeam's Launchpad, our kickoff. So familiar stage. What does it mean? Look, for me, it means very simply, customers are looking for data portability, right? And one of our pillars, and when we talk to our customers, is giving them the option. We obviously have to secure the data, but giving them that ability to port the data to wherever they need to go. And whether it's a new hypervisor, a new cloud, we need to give customers more choice, more than ever. And so working with you guys, I think we're going to remove complexity out of the equation, make life simple, and give customers that data portability option they've been looking for quite some time.
It's music to my ears, of course. So now we have a lot of partners in the room. From a partner standpoint, how does this impact them?
Yeah, when I put my partner lens on, it's like, how do I solve for my customer easily? Right? And the combination of the platform plus Veeam Data Platform and our Vault solution bundled together is just this really easy offering to a customer. So from a partner's perspective, you can start behaving or acting like the trusted advisor, taking the customer on the right journey, and obviously maximizing revenue and margins as you sell both of our solutions together.
Excellent. So now some of you may be wondering, well, who's this guy over here? All right, so this is TJ, the CEO of Ottava. Now, TJ, a year ago, you guys were a brand new partner of Scale. You came to you hadn't even signed your paperwork, by the way, at the time.
Yeah.
Right? You came to the event, and after the event, or actually while we were still at the event, you said, we're a huge Veeam partner. We really need to get Scale and Veeam together. So first, you guys played a pivotal role in making that happen. So thank you very much to you and to Brian and Austin and the whole team for making that happen. But from the perspective of an MSP, how do you see this partnership?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having us. Appreciate it. No, I couldn't agree with Shiva more. If you think about in our space, you're both representing the development side, like creation of the product and solving those problems. The resellers face a different issue, right? Which is how do you connect legitimacy to the platform and tell the world that, hey, this is an enterprise class product, which is interesting because Veeam faced that for a decade. Scale has faced that. And so what I think this creates is optionality and legitimacy, the ability for partners to now stand and talk to customers and say, hey, listen, like there is more than just Broadcom. you have other options. And Broadcom's just one of many out there, but I think that's what customers are looking for. And then you marry that to the season that we're transitioning in distributed computing and edge, and I think it just the timing makes a lot of sense. So hopefully it gives you an opportunity as partners to have better at-bats when you're talking to customers and deliver what you're trying to solve, which is the business issue, not tuck in the technology, to make the sale.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah. So Shiva, back to you. So how can people learn more about what's going on with this while they're here?
I think they already are, because I went down to the booth last night and there was just a buzz of activity. So firstly, hit the booth. We've got our whole team there. And then on Thursday, I think we have a session where we're demoing, showing the beta version of the product, have a full session for everybody to get up to speed. But I'll be at the booth a little later. Love to shake some hands, but I'm already hearing a bunch of noise and activity around it, which makes me super excited.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. And thank you for your partnership once again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. There we go. All right. So as Shiva said, you can scan this QR code to get more information, check out the booth. There are a number of sessions taking place when you look at your agendas, both from Veeam and Otava, talking about different aspects here. And I'm sure many of you are going to want to come and check out the session where Veeam is going to demo the new integration with their version 13 that supports HyperCore. One other QR code to show you here, and you might want to grab a picture quick. You'll see it twice. This is the first time. But tomorrow afternoon, there is a session where I and my co-founder, Scott Loftmiller, our Chief Product Officer, are going to spend a few minutes answering questions about the long-term vision and future, what's happening over the next 5 years. So if you have a question you'd like to ask us, you can scan there, fill out the form, and we'll be perusing through those things and choosing at least a few of them to get through. All right, everybody, thank you very much once again. This is my contact information, very cleverly, jeff@scalecomputing.com, if you couldn't already figure that out. But that is my real cell phone number, so we're going to scrape that before this goes on YouTube. But you guys can have it. It's the same number my wife texts me at and the kids text me at, so please feel free to reach out to me at any time. And thank you once again for coming to Platform 2025.